Okay, I'm getting the okay here. Let's see what you see, Corey. Still coming up on my end, but
Got
there's
it.
okay. Okay, folks. Welcome to Quantum Leap Live with David and Corey, and this is our second to last show on before the holidays, and we'll resume about in mid-January. But Corey's if you're new to the show, it's called Quantum Leap, and it's really about business development and personal development. And we have a great program today. Corey's gracious enough to be kind of a reviewer and a commenter on a program I created called Thought Leader, which is based on the thoughts of Bruce Lee, but it's also really inspired by Corey and Take Wing Coaching and some other coaching stuff that we've learned really jointly. And I first want to just uh, do a quick check in with you, Corey, if you don't mind just introducing yourself and um, tell us what you do. If you have any initial thoughts on what we've been going over on Thought Leader, feel free to chime in as well.
Yeah, I am Cory Knott, and I am a business partnership coach with Take Wing Coaching, so co-owner of a coaching program. But I focus especially on people who are trying to be in business together, and whatever that business form takes, they are wanting it to be well run. And yeah, so the whole idea behind this is, there's a lot of things that go into being, even for co-leaders, right? It becomes even more challenging because we're working on, we want to work together, but oftentimes we work against each other. There's so many things that go on. And so a lot of things that David and I talk about are around leadership, standing out, being better, having a greater and stronger vision, so that as we move forward, the people who are with us move forward with us.
Okay, great. Um, and I also said this program is kind of loosely based on what I've seen of you as being a thought leader and the importance of thought leadership. So, I think we all really admire those business thought leaders out there, and because they've changed our lives. So, I just love the opportunity to kind of give that back, how to get started with the thoughts of you and Ivan Meisner and others in our networks. And um, one key book that I wanted to just reintroduce a few things on Bruce's thought, you know, thought leadership, so to speak. And a great entry place is this book called Striking Thoughts, which is actually from his notebooks. It's edited from Tuttle, with John Little, pardon me, but the author is actually Bruce. So it's his words, and I love this first quote. It has some quotes on just Bruce's thought, and here's a one from Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. He says he was a teacher first of all. He taught philosophy and tried to spread knowledge and wisdom. The integrity with which Bruce lived his life and tried to uphold what he believed to be right, that is a clear example of how it ought to be done. No matter what it is you're doing, do it with total honesty and total dedication. He definitely influenced me. And, it's just fascinating to see who was in Bruce's network and who he identified with. And, I'm a teacher probably more than anything else. So it's no wonder I really connect with him. Steve McQueen, one of the great film legends of the time, and um, one of Bruce's great good friends said, I thought Bruce was a brilliant, fine philosopher about everyday living. He was very much into finding out who he was. His comment to people was, know yourself. The good head that he acquired was through his knowing himself. He and I used to have great long discussions about that. No matter what you do in life, if you don't know yourself, you're never going to be able to appreciate anything in life. That, I think, is today's mark of a good human being, to know yourself. And, I think you really bring that to your clients, Corey, and your, coaching programs, even with the partnerships. It's almost like your first number one getting into business is you got to learn about yourself and to be able to get into that business. I don't know if you have any initial thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, self-awareness is critical, and I mean, there's a lot of great stuff out there, and I think sometimes we can actually get a little overwhelmed without the self-aware, about all these assessments and things like that. And the great thing about having a coach and an expert on these subjects is you get a bit of a mirror rather than reading some text. You take a test and read some text about it, and you think, okay, that's all me. And but with the coach, you can actually kind of feedback and say, okay, what are some of the issues that you're really struggling with? And this is how it kind of works in your favor and against you. So this is as we become more aware of how we think and it's not so much personality, it's more about how we express our emotions, right? So it's how we express our personality versus actually what it is, and how these things can work for and against us. As I said, that helps in any situation as a business owner, what we do in sales, what we do in marketing, how we go out about networking, and it opens up opportunities to feel like we can belong in the groups that we need to.
Great. And thank you. I have just a couple more passages I'm going to read because I think this really goes to the core of his thought. And I realized when we started on these episodes, it's good to just introduce some of his worldview. So I think that's what I'm trying to do today for probably the first half. And, he really proves that one person can make a difference. Here's just a passage I'll read. Bruce changed worlds, the world of material arts, martial arts, the worlds of Asian and American cinema, and the personal worlds of countless students and fans have been transformed by his brilliance. Far more than just a passing influence, Lee has continued to inspire and stimulate the minds of individuals from all walks of life for decades. Interest in his thought is on the rise, and many regard him as a contemporary philosopher and visionary, discovering in his words an antidote to contemporary problems, as well as finding in him a model of discipline, strength, and wisdom. Lee's philosophy forms for us a vision of world progress, a world free of suffering, and a world of enlightenment, unflawed by ignorance, superstition, and corruption. In Lee's words, a world of love, peace, and brotherhood. To Bruce Lee, philosophy was not the professional playground of academics, but every human being's gateway to the greatest adventure of human spirit. It illuminated the frontiers of human possibility and obliterated the shadows of doubt and insecurity. Unlike others content to follow, Bruce Lee insisted upon charting his own course toward truth and encouraged those who wished to share his insights to do likewise. Just a couple more sentences here. While Lee was a champion of individual rights and individual development, both of which stress the sovereignty of the individual as an end in himself, he also spoke to something deeper, the commonality of all human beings and the removal of such artificial barriers to true brotherhood as nationality, ethnicity, and class structure, so that human beings could live together peaceably. I didn't even know that was a word, as independent equals. So yeah, so I'm gonna leave it there. I love that his worldview, and I think it's so timely. If you look at when he lived, I think a lot of the problems that we really are dealing with now started kind of when he came to the fore, and a lot of times when the problems begin, you see him the most clearly, and he was definitely one of those who saw those clearly, I would say. But I heard a quote yesterday on the news that the American people are smarter than the economists, because we have the economists telling us that the economy is great and things are working out great, but then people out there in the general public are like, no, I don't feel that. So I think it's proof that really normal people can be smarter than the experts and academics, and I just love that about Bruce. He was of course a very smart person, and also gifted with his martial arts and that type of thing. So
Yeah, and I think he talks a lot about, regardless of the circumstances, you have, opportunities, and you can create opportunities. And, as entrepreneurs, it is easy sometimes to get bogged down and think, oh my God, the circumstances are horrible. The economy is, going south, and what can I do? And what will that mean for me? But it's ultimately, if you can take a look at like his vision, and then how does your vision fit into that? Where is the opportunity, right? If you have this bigger picture of what your life, your business, what everything around you is going to look like, that creates the opportunities regardless of the circumstances. um, there's dreams and there's vision, and dreams might be like everything's going to be perfect, but a vision is more about what can it actually be. It's going to make sense to you as you write it out, and um, and that creates the opportunity. And it's clear that Bruce was a man of vision. So how would you model that? I think he was also a man of action, and I think, I don't know about you, David. I'm not as much about, I mean, as much as I'd like to be about action, I am more about, I like the philosophical and the discussion type of thing. So, if you're a person of action, sometimes, the vision is very action oriented. If you're more philosophical, it might be more written out, but one way or the other, it's got to push you forward and through, the sludge of everything that's going on, because it's just easy to get stuck if you're not.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
I would say I've tried to move more towards action, although that's my comfort zone. I would love just being thinking and writing and reading. I'm
Yeah,
happy,
well,
so I don't even have
teachers
to.
like to teach, right? Yeah,
Yeah,
it's like the action is the teaching is the action, but that's not always. But first, you've got to create the opportunity to do that. Yeah,
yeah. That's part of what I love about the podcast too. Is it's a easy way to put things into action. All we have to do is kind of show up with the crib sheet, and we kind of put the ideas into action, so to speak. I think the first step with ideas is really just to share them with somebody else, and the synergy between us and what we're interested in, I think, is a great kind of um, thing on this podcast, and I really see as a thing of action too.
right.
um yeah, we're probably not going to get through everything here, but I did want to, we're not even going to get through my whole program with him. And this is really a whole book here that I'm trying to just kind of tease and give the initial things on. But I think this concept of yin and yang, everybody knows that symbol. You've seen him on the surf tees. And I think, first I'll just say I'm not an expert in this concept yet, but I love it comes from Eastern philosophy. And I think a lot of what's kind of misunderstood or not acknowledged in the West is things in Eastern philosophy. So to understand the whole world, you have to understand Eastern and Western thought. And I think this yin and the yang is a great core concept. And it's really the yin is like the flexible, like the like water part, and the yang is the inflexible. And they use kind of like female and male as an analogy for this, or wind and rock or whatever. So but it's and there's whole books written on this. There's something called the Great Ultimate, which Bruce studied. And that's the symbol that accompanies the one and the many. So if you look at the yin and the yang, it's the white and the dark, but they're one, but they're separate parts, and there's one part of each and the other one. We have that symbol on our kind of teaser for this show. And according to the history of the Great Ultimate diagram, the Great Ultimate through movement creates yang. When yang reaches its limit, the movement becomes tranquil, which generates yin. The alternation of movement and tranquility creates yin and yang, which in turn give birth to the five agents of water, fire, wood, metal, and earth. These five agents constitute one vast interdependent system of yin yang, and yin yang constitutes the great ultimate. And that's a quote right out of the book. There are ultimately one, and the one is actually differentiated into the many, and the one and the money each has its own correct state of being. So he just finds a lot of truth there. And I think the difference in the West is that we tend to see just the divisions and the differences, where you always have to look at the commonality. And sometimes that's also misunderstood or forced, to for example see the whole world without borders or things. I think there's some misconceptions out there about realities as well. But um um so yeah. I wanted to introduce that. I was going to just ask, I had a question for you just on this same concept about, in terms of your own life or maybe knowledge of the yin and the yang in our business, where do we need to be flexible as entrepreneurs, and where do we need to be inflexible? I love that Ivan Meisner quote, it's not about doing like different things 1,000 times. It's about doing like the same 5 or 6 things like 1,000 times. Well, I kind of screwed up that quote, but I see that as like a inflexible thing. Whereas if you're too much like water, you're too scattered, for example. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I could give you a really good passage from the Tao Te Ching, which I think is somewhat similar, because I think it's flexibility and inflexible are not really the right term so much as it's here's a line from the Tao Te Ching which I really like, which is, be fluid as melting ice, shapeable as a block of wood. So if you think of melting ice or the fluid as something that moves and is easy, is flexible, right? And whereas a block of wood is is inflexible, but it's really shapeable, right? It can be carved out. Rock can be, it may be inflexible, but it can be carved out. And I think that what we do is we kind of dig down to that potential by staying in place and being patient. And so the idea being of doing 6 things 1,000 times isn't so much about being inflexible. It's about being unmoving until the right things arise, right? Whereas entrepreneurs, especially those of us who are maybe more on the ADHD spectrum and so on, but really common among entrepreneurs, is the shiny object syndrome. Like, we want something new because we're disappointed with the results we're getting, so we jump into something new very easily. It's just kind of the nature of the entrepreneurial mindset. And I mean, if you want to watch what's happening now with Elon Musk, it's a perfect example of where he says one thing one day and does something different the next, and it's almost like he said he was going to do this and now he's doing that. It's the opposite, because he just got disappointed with the results he's getting and he isn't sticking to his plan. And he can afford not to, I suppose, until he can. But we can't, when we're kind of living in the trenches, it's a little harder to afford to move around, but we still do it. So the point being is to, to apply the patience, to wait for the result rather than to allow the disappointment to shape us and move us to being too flexible, right? If you're too flexible, you're not going to, you're just going to move from one thing to another, which is what water does, right? Yeah. So.
Yeah, one thing that comes to mind, I've been listening to that book, The Pumpkin Plan by Mike Michalowicz on Audible. I guess Don Lyons was actually the head of one of his companies for that, as a coaching company. This book was probably written a while ago, but and that, their focus there is, how do you grow that giant pumpkin? I think, if you're out
Right.
there trying to grow little pumpkins, you're never going to get that Apple or Microsoft, but it's really like a specific formula. And it's a fascinating book that makes me think, and it's about exactly what you're saying about everybody's chasing these shiny objects and not coming up with the formula or following the formula that's going to deliver that giant pumpkin.
Well, I think it's easy. I mean, I do this all the time, and I have to rein myself in. I have a saying, which is just that new is never disappointing, right? It's like, oh, I have this new idea. It hasn't disappointed me yet, so I can jump into that. And as soon as not that it gets hard, it's just you put everything into practice, and then it's kind of like, okay, well, this isn't really working, and now I've got a new idea, which is even just as much fun. And ideation is a killer for a lot of us. Some entrepreneurs or business owners, they're very focused. It's easy for them to, you can be the opposite direction too. You can do too many things too many times and not get results, but just keep at it, which is it's finding that right balance in there too, right? Got to be ready to let go when it's time, but usually we let go a little too early, way too early.
Yeah, yeah. There, that another little adage I heard this morning on the science of getting rich. He says we always got to be looking for that one little thing out there that'll make a big difference for us. And if we're too focused in on those same things 1,000 times, we're not seeing the we do. Again, there's the exception, that one shiny object, which might not be shiny, but it could make a whole world of difference. Maybe it's getting a coach, maybe it's uh you know changing your product offering. For me, I had that recently when I started focusing on script writing and rewriting the script with this kind of new system. I feel like made a huge difference in some results. And sounds like you were doing some of that too with your marketing as well, and also your partner, your focus on partnerships. But
Yeah, which is where I'm starting to wanting to build my reputation and hired somebody to help with that. But that's a lot of writing, so it's being consistent and writing, and that's actually a good example too, where it's like, okay, I write this and I write this and I write this, and it's like, well, I can't just do 6 articles and be done. It's got to be 50, 60, 100 articles, to kind of establish authority, and then a book, and that's challenging for me because I kind of want to jump into the next new thing, and this is always one more project on my plate. Um,
yeah,
yeah.
I hear you. And we were just talking about another one earlier, but I do find just writing even like the first dozen articles helps you get the lay of the land and organize your
Right.
thoughts. And yeah, again, I know the key is
Yeah,
always
I think you
getting
have more
started.
experience as
Yeah.
a writer. I need to, feel more accepted about that. And that's another thing too, is I think we sometimes, we a lot of us like to learn, and so we want to learn, and we take on a project because it's a learning thing, and then we kind of learn something about it, and then it's like, okay, now I want to learn something else, and so that can be also part of the challenge of like, okay, I've learned this, now let's actually put it into practice and make it useful and valuable. Yeah.
Yeah, we can look at doing some maybe more article. I was thinking of turning this show into some articles. Actually, we have so much great content that you could take these themes and basically write an article. But um,
Yeah. Yeah.
getting off on a slight tangent, I have a couple more quick things I want to
Sure.
go over and just touch on because they're key parts of this program. And one is finding your voice, which I thought such a key thing as an author, as being a thought leader, how to find your voice. And I'll just read part of some of my conclusions and introduction to this. The finding your voice is more of a process than a place to arrive at. However, once you find your voice, you will have arrived at some, as some like to say. We find that the kernels of our fully self-realized self have always been there. They just needed to be acknowledged, nurtured, and developed. A mentor of mine, the late Bob Proctor, would often say that we do not sow and reap in the same season. And my experience has been that we often reap a long while after what we have sown the seeds of our success. That's just how it works. The key
Mm-hmm.
here, like so many things in life, is to get started. We find our voice by taking action and putting ourselves and our ideas and our activities out into the world. In the case of becoming a thought leader, it is really about disseminating ideas in the clearest and most effective way possible. My journey to becoming a thought leader did not really begin until I started writing a regular column on public policy issues. Another watershed event in my life was starting my weekly podcast with you, Cory, in the early days of the coronavirus pandemic in 2020. Another key process was my development of the use of photographic images and video to disseminate my ideas. So, everybody has a specific a path, and I think so much of your thought leadership and finding your voice is really through uh, and correct me if I'm wrong, has been really through your capacity in BNI as a speaker and really kind of a individual coach. But um, so I think there's um,
Yeah.
different ways to come at it. But I was just curious about how you think you found your voice. How you sounds like you're still working on those other channels to really disseminate that, because all that stuff that you could put it out on in columns, you could put it out as a master class, as a book, like you're saying. And this stuff takes years, but and if you have any thoughts on how future thought leaders might go about finding their voice, at least getting started.
Yeah, I have to say, really, investing in personal development was probably the biggest thing that I did to really help me find my voice. I mean, it just absolutely, it was like, thanks to Don Lyons for that. But the suggestion, put 10% of your into it and go do this thing is what she said, and I did with productive learning. And the culmination of that is next year I'll be going on a cruise to the Greek islands with 10 coaches and 40 other people. But really that self-investment in quality personal development, right? Not self-help books, things like that, but actually, or even, group therapy. It's really, diving into the things that are holding you back and having, discussion with a coach, and it could be in group, it could be individual, done both. But that investment is where, we learn to figure out why we don't know our voice and let it out, right? I mean, I did public speaking for a couple of years, and then I did one of these kind of programs, a very experiential one, and kind of hard to explain how it all worked out, but really the idea was to just be comfortable. And from that point on, I was never uncomfortable on stage after that. Like, just I might get a little nervous about my material if I have to memorize a bunch of stuff, and but I don't get nervous being in front of people at all. It just is like, okay, but before that, I was, I always had those tremors. I had the headaches. I had everything, that a lot of public speakers get even after they've been doing it for a while, unless they are well trained or really love it. But some of us, it's terrifying. So we have to find that story inside of us one way or another and work out the emotion. So I think for me, that's really how to find the voice. And then decide how you're going to disseminate it, right? Is it public speaking? Is it going to be writing? Is it going to be podcasting, video? There's so many different ways to go about it. Yeah, writing fiction. I don't know. Everybody's got a different way of doing it. Yeah.
Yeah, no, great. And then we'll just a time check. We'll go just a couple more minutes here. I just have one last thing which we've talked about on the show, and I actually misplaced the little crib sheet I was going to read on it. I don't know what I did with it, but it's on really atomic habits, something we've talked about on this show. And Bruce really had these kind of defined habits, and I think a lot of what you teach and what is in this program, Thought Leader, is how to keep that motivation and that fuel going to be pressing forward. So how do you develop these productive habits? And that it takes a lot of time. I think this is such a critical thing. And then living in the times that we do with all this, say you can get totally distracted by something in the news or social media, or everybody not everybody's present all the time. But I was just going to see if you have any thoughts on these habits, what key habits you might have, and how do we go about developing more productive habits, like in writing and the things that we got to get done. I've been for example working on recording some audio program, and I find it's slow going at first, and then you're kind of flustered, but the more you do it, the more productive you become, so to speak. So.
Yeah, I think well, I mean, as you said, I think it's just taking that first step and doing it. And honestly, I struggle with it all the time. And being ADHD, I can find many different distractions. And I do find that having some, for me, it's figuring out where I can step out. And so, I've got a lot of backyard activities, and it's nice I can get up and go run around the backyard, take care of the chickens, take care of the goats, things like that. And then, come back in and I feel more settled into it. And sometimes I need distractions just from my head, so I have a little bit of TV or music in the background, whatever you like. But it's kind of finding where you get comfortable and just can get into the routine of doing things. I think a good habit too is especially if you're not comfortable networking or things like that, is put things in your schedule. Just have it on your schedule and make it a commandment that you do these things. sometimes, we back out, but the more we allow ourselves to back out, that's where it becomes harder to do, to build a habit, right? Is what is in your brain saying, let's go do something else other than this. And so, I always like, what Elaine Betts used to say, is like, if I say yes to this, what am I saying no to? And that can be a good way to kind of just resume the habit, or remind yourself, like, I said I was going to do this. Am I going to do this? And I like to also kind of review my day, like how much did I accomplish today? And because for a long time, I just felt like wasn't doing anything. And so it's like, oh yeah, I got more done. And that kind of inspires me to do even more, and to stay on track. Yeah. Even if, it doesn't have to be big things, just, I did this work on my business and around the house rather than distracting things.
Yeah, folks want to learn more, pick up that copy of Atomic Habits. It has some great suggestions in there on how to develop those habits. There's also that other book, which I haven't read, The 7 Habits of Successful People, and I'm not getting that title right, but I did want to just end with a paragraph here from on Bruce Lee's thought, which I think you're going to just really love, about Lee's constant questioning of the conventional wisdom or the assumed truth. And there's just an incredible quote in this paragraph here. Lee's constant questioning of himself as well as of the assumed truth more often than not reveals to us the inadequacy of the conventional position on such matters. It's this questioning that provides the necessary basis for real understanding to occur. As Lee himself said, it is only in the contrast of comparison some new thing might grow. Lee was firmly insistent that even if he were to know the answers, and even if he were to tell them to us, they wouldn't do us any good. In other words, it's in the nature of Lee's statements on life that you have to puzzle out their validity for yourself. To Lee's way of thinking, any answer he could provide is worth nothing to any other individual unless that individual has come to see its validity as a result of his own independent thought on the matter. This is why Lee's philosophical writings are so successful as instruments for drawing you into your own mind and by extension into the realm of philosophy. And that it's something we all forget. I think that's what I like to try to do with this show, to encourage people, to give people a starting point, but we don't want to presume that we have all the answers, so to speak. And I think that's why we get along so well, is we actually believe in these things that very similar. A lot of your programs really believe in this philosophy, in my opinion. Yeah.
Yeah, I really just believe and that was originally one of the core values we put in Take Wing Coaching, and I have this, and as I do some other kinds of work that I'm doing, is really to challenge everything. Everything you tell yourself is to be challenged, right? There's no objective truth. I know some things are very comfortable. I love my family. I love these people, things like that. But even there, you can put questions to. You can put any thought you have or any idea you have to a question to determine if it's really true and if it's serving you, and or how it could serve you better, right? And so I do this constantly with myself, though I can't say it's really, self-coaching is usually not terribly productive, but as we do more personal development, it gets easier. But it's still just it's a way of growing past our limitations, our self limitations. Is just to constantly question, to challenge every belief, and whether whatever you rest upon is the right answer, and then challenge it again.
Yeah, I think that, and looking at businesses too, it seems like the most successful business leaders, that's what they're doing. One thing that worked to get you to a $200,000 business, you might have to completely change your philosophy and almost go out on a limb to get to that $1 million or $2 million mark. So, I mean,
Yeah, that's a tough one. What is that I heard? Like they said, the billionaires, it's getting to the first billion that's the hardest part, right? Because it's just an unbelievable number, and then it's like, oh, now that was easy. So, not that I intend to get to the $1 billion mark, but if
well,
that's your plan, it's like there's probably a number in your head that you cannot that is challenging you. Yeah. And we get that. You see that a lot with, you'll find a limitation if you ask deeply enough. And, do I believe I can make 500,000, 1 million? Can I be a multi-millionaire? And if it starts to feel like really, really uncomfortable, that's probably something in your deeper story. And it could be about money. It could be about, can I have 1,000 friends? Can I have, a life of, partnership with somebody? And so these are things that come from our early life, and patterns that, they get ingrained, and we don't realize how much they run us and limit us. And so that's the challenge. And if you find that challenge, it's probably not something you can work out yourself. That's where you start working on, with a coach, or there's coaches and trainers. It's kind of the same thing, but really, even a hypnotist, right? Sometimes, we talk to like Jake Ralston. I mean, his NLP work it can really help overcome some of those limitations, especially if they're really strongly, in place. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
Tracy does IST work, which I have found absolutely fantastic, because sometimes there's a very emotional place he's come from, and she can help take that emotion out of it. So it just becomes a story more than, than a charge. Yeah.
Excellent. Well, thanks for taking the time to review this stuff. And I know we have one more session next week on a couple of things that are really right in your wheelhouse as well. And then next year, we're going to start with some new content that we're going to talk about and more guests when we resume in January, mid-January. So.
And next Tuesday, I'm actually speaking at a group, the IMC. I'm going to be doing a talk on how to move your clients into action. So it's oftentimes it's really geared towards consultants, which a lot of us are, and we want them to do what we've been telling them to do as consultants, right? Because consultants tell people what to do, coaches do not. And a lot of times they may move a little bit, but they don't really see it, or they just shelve it. And so I'm going to be talking a little bit about how our mindsets tend to work against the mindset of the person we're working with. And it's just unconscious miscommunication. And so how we can align our communication with the other person, very simply.
Yeah, great. I'd like to hear that. Maybe I'll put that meeting on my calendar if I could come as a guest, or we could maybe record it too.
Yeah, we can also talk about it, because it's the first time I've done this talk in a few times, but now I'm going to get it really narrowed down to make it, like 3 things to focus on, and to improve communication, because I think there's a lot of opportunity there.
Okay, great. And well, thanks for all the great pictures. I saw you got a couple new goats for your daughter. Those were beautiful photos. Some of your farm animals that you have there.
Yeah, we got him from Trevor Henley. I think you've met him. And yeah, so we got a couple goats. We'll probably get one more. We want to have milking goats. And they're just little Nigerians, and it's a lot of fun. It's they're cute. They're like little dogs, really, but very springy dogs.
Yeah, Carrie would love those.
Bring
Yeah.
her over. We can have a play date with Kaden. I know she's kind of getting a little older than Kaden, but happy to.
Yeah, she has cousins that actually Kate Caden's right in between them. So she plays well with other kids, like
Yeah.
younger kids. Yeah.
Yeah, if you'd like to, that'd be fine. I mean, the ghosts would love to have more company, that's for sure.
Okay. Yeah, I'll we'll check in about that and see when might be good, and we can do a 1-to-1 out there, maybe go over some of this other content for next year, or go to Mexican food or something, but or order out or
Oh, that'd be nice. Yeah.
yeah. Okay.
All right.
Okay, good. Well, we're going to leave it there. And folks, Cory and David signing off for Quantum Leap, and we'll see you next week. Thanks for listening.